Let's open with prayer. Lord, we just want to thank you that you are faithful to us, that you hold us fast. You hold us fast when we are strong and clinging to you. You hold us fast when we are weak and sinking, and you hold us fast in all the places in between. Help us, Lord, to lean into that, to trust you, and to find you to be secure and worthy of everything. We thank you again for this morning. I pray, Lord, that these words out of your text would connect in the hearts of us, and my words would in no way detract or distract from what you would want to teach. We pray these things in your name. Amen. All right, I want you guys to throw your minds back with me to July 3rd, 2025. And for most of you, that's like the day right before July 4th, which is a holiday. For us, it's the second, for those of us who sell fireworks, which is what I've been doing the last 3 4th of July, it is the second most sales-oriented day for selling fireworks. And I went into that day with a whole lot of expectations, with a lot of high hopes that we would be able to raise a lot of money, and, I wouldn't have to do, work over the summer if I didn't want to. That was kind of the plan. But that same day, we also had probably the second scariest storm I've ever lived through. It was a storm we knew was coming, like they told us on the radar, but it came so fast and with such high winds that it was terrifying. We ended up having tables blown over, fireworks were destroyed, and we came probably, and I don't want to exaggerate, probably within 20 seconds of our entire tent just going off the side of the Sam's Club where it was stationed. It was because the wind came in and it picked up 300-pound concrete blocks like it was nothing and just set them down over and over again on that side. And it was terrifying. And one of the things about storms is it reveals something about ourselves as we go through storms. And in that particular case, it was like the realization of what an expectation can do, and also just the reality that sometimes unexpected difficulties find us, whether we're looking for them or not. And for us, expectations can serve as a double-edged sword, right? When you think about going through difficulties, expectation helps us see something beyond the trial and be able to say, I'm going to try to get through this to get to that. And so expectations are just part of life. Like, we all live by expectations. We wake up every single day with an expectation of how that day is going to go. And we go into every season of life with certain sets of expectations. And I think for our church, it's no different. We have tons and tons of expectations. But the downside of expectation is what happens when those expectations are not realized. When the thing that we're hoping for does not happen. We go through this difficulty to get to this thing, and then suddenly there's a storm there that we didn't expect, and suddenly our lives are looking a lot more confusing than we would have thought possible. For some of us this year, this has been a very stormy season, both as individuals, because I look around here and I see people who have had a lot of physical things, a lot of spiritual things, some financial things, and it can be very discouraging and very disturbing to say, I'm following God, and yet by following God, I find myself in tough places. I've used this example in the high school a lot. One of the things that God wants to do is he always wants us to have an open hand. And sometimes with expectations, we cling to them. And when God starts to try to pull the expectation out of our hand, the thing we think we need, if we do not have an open palm with him, in the process of him trying to pull the knife out, what happens? We are cut. We experience pain. And one of the things we sometimes think is he's taking something out of my hand that I desperately need. I need this. God, don't take this from me, whatever it is. And when he says, I want you to hold it with an open palm, he says that enables me to take the thing out you think you need. But now your hand is also open to receive the thing that I actually want to give you. And as we take a look at the text today, in Matthew 14, I just want to challenge us for a couple things. Because one, how many of you know the story of Jesus walking on water with Peter? Raise your hand if you've ever heard that story before, seen it in a movie, read it in a book, right? One of the dangers of taking a look at a text that we're super familiar with is we can forget that it's connected to us and that we are supposed to read ourselves into the story. So one of the things I want us to keep in mind then as we're taking a look at this story with the 12 is, number one, is to encourage us to look for parallels. Like, they are going through a literal storm with each other, and seemingly Jesus is far away. And I just want us to think about your storms, the things going on in your life. where it feels like Jesus is far away, like you don't know exactly where you're supposed to be going. So I just want us to kind of connect with the disciples a little bit, to remember that they are where they do not want to be, and yet God has them exactly where he wants them to be. So as we go through this, I want you to kind of put yourself in their shoes and then connect your struggles with their struggles. And then the second thing, obviously, is to think about the dialogue of what Jesus is going to share. Jesus is going to do some talking here. The disciples are going to do some talking here. And as we read through the discussion, I want those words to connect to us, because the words that Jesus shares to the disciples is the same set of words he's going to share with you and me. And the things the disciples say mirror our own hearts, represent us in this particular story. So I just want to encourage us with that, because, again, if you're familiar with this text, we can just jump right to the end and forget about the journey and all the things that happened to these people in real life, in real time. So I want to open now with actually reading the text, Matthew 14:22. I'm probably going to stop at verse 33. I know I put on the front that it was going to go through 36, but I'm going to stop a little short. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And this is right after he got done feeding the 5,000, so that's the crowd that he's dismissing, probably a crowd of 20,000 people. So we're talking a very large crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountain to pray, as he often did. When the evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, which is around 3 a.m., Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." And that's the text. One of the things that this passage opens with, which is kind of shocking, is Jesus sent them on purpose into the storm. Now, some of the storms that find us because we've made decisions or choices that have led to negative consequences. So some of the storms we experience in life, we were responsible for. But this is not one of those storms. In this story, Jesus tells them, "I want you to get in the boat," and he commands them to cross over. And he knows exactly what's going to happen, but what he wants to do is, through this ordeal, he wants to show his disciples something about himself that they could not have known any other way. And so in this case, it's just important for us to know, you might be in a storm, and it might be because you are obeying Jesus. You might be there because you're doing what God has called you to do. And that should hopefully give us a little bit of comfort in the middle of a deep storm that we're not really thrilled to be a part of. And in this case, too, the disciples are rowing, and the last time they were in a storm, who was with them? Jesus was with them. Now, he was sleeping, but he was at least with them. This time, he's nowhere near. He is far, far away as far as they are concerned. And in this particular case, it's one of those struggles for many of us, for myself included, that when it seems like Jesus is far away and we're in the middle of a place we don't like, it's easy to start to do everything as if Jesus isn't present and it's all up to me to solve the problem. Now, we don't know if the disciples have that mentality, but I can imagine that they are very, very worried, because according to some of the different gospel accounts, they'd been rowing in the middle of the night for 8 hours. And in John's gospel, it tells us they weren't even halfway to where they needed to be after 8 hours of rowing. Do you ever feel that way? Do you ever feel like you're following Jesus, you're where you're supposed to be, but it's just like you're rowing and rowing and rowing and getting nowhere? And again, it's not that they were in the wrong place. It's not that they were in the wrong heart mindset. They were exactly where God called them to be, and yet they felt like they were getting nowhere with all the efforts that they were throwing out there. And I just find that to be, in a way, encouraging, because with all their sweat and fear and tears, Jesus didn't abandon them. But they were where they were supposed to be, even though it looked like no forward progress was being made. And they weren't wrong, and they were exactly where they were supposed to be. And sometimes that's encouraging for us, because it can feel like you start to question, why am I here? Why am I rowing? Is there another thing I should be doing? Should I pull the oars in and just let the waves drive me wherever they want me to go? And this is when Jesus shows up. But here's the scariest part about Jesus showing up. If you're on death's door in the middle of a lake where you're about to be overwhelmed by waves and you see a ghost walking towards you, what do you think? Are you like, oh, this is a good omen? Things are gonna end well for me. It would just heighten the fear. And we see fear a lot. And this is the first time we're told. The disciples see Jesus walking towards them. They assume it's a ghost. And their fear level, which was probably at an 8, now jumps up to a 10. And they freak out because now there's this ghostly creature walking towards them in the middle of a storm when they are exhausted and right at the point of breaking. But Jesus is there on purpose. He had been praying all night long, as Jesus sometimes did. And I want you to notice one thing in the text it tells us. Verse 25. During the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them. He knew where they were. He knew exactly where they were. And the other thing we see is he knew exactly when he wanted to show up for them. Now, when did they want him to show up? Minute 5 into the storm? When does he show up? Hour 8 into the storm. And again, he does all of this on purpose. His timing, his location, all of it is for a purpose. And so for us, whether you're going through isolated individual storms or whether we're talking about the storms just of the world we live in, Iran just happened yesterday, or we're talking about our church and the transition we're in, it's just important to remember, if we are listening to the voice of Jesus and following him, he knows where we are, and he is going to show up exactly when he intends to. And it may not be when we want. I can safely say it often is not when we want. But he has not lost sight of us. He knows exactly where we are. And he starts walking towards them at just the right time. At just the right time. And so they are scared. They are terrified. Their words reveal this. They are like, we're all going to die. It's a ghost. But then here's our first thing that Jesus says to them. He responds with, do not be afraid. Take courage. I am with you. I'm here. And they take courage. There's something, that's one of those things in the Bible that shows up hundreds and hundreds of times, is this command, do not be afraid. Because here's the truth of the matter. If we follow Jesus regularly, he is going to lead us to scary places. He will. And we kind of have to have our minds made up that when he leads us to those scary places, we will go. We will take that as his direction for us and continue to walk forward. And normally, in a story like this is where Jesus gets into the boat, the storm is calmed, and we're like, way to go, Jesus, thumbs up. But this story takes a very unexpected turn, right? What happens next? We have Peter hanging off the end of the boat saying, Lord, if it's you, call me to you, and I'm going to walk to you. Okay? That is crazy talk for a person like me, okay? Now, I do want to make this case. I think there are Peters in this room. There are some of you in this room that you're like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do, and you just jump right over the boat, and the rest of us are like, come back. Most of us, at least if this text is like representative, you have a 1 person out of 12 who's willing to hop out of the boat instantly, and then you have the rest of us, the other 11 that are rowing against the storm, waiting for it to end. And Jesus here is like, I think, smiles, because Peter does something that's amazing here. He does 2 things that are amazing. There is a warning here for some of us. If you are the Peter type, and you are the type to be like, I'm in. I see something over there, I'm just going to jump in and go for it. There is the tendency to be impetuous, and that isn't what Peter is. Peter often is impetuous. He'll just like do things, and you're like, you chopped off a guy's ear. What's up with that? You did this. What are you doing? But here, he does something remarkable. If you are the Peter type and you are prone to action, what does he do before he gets out of the boat? He asks if it's a good idea from Jesus. He says, if it is you, call me. And I want you to notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, call me to action. Call me to walk on water. What does he say? Look at the text. If it is you, call me to you. And this is something that's super important for us. We can get caught up in Christian activity, which is not a bad thing, right? We have a basketball thing we're going to start in a couple weeks, a great thing. We got a mission trip coming up to Romania, a great thing. We have opportunity to serve our community, but Jesus is not calling us to those things first. What is he calling us to? Himself. He is calling us to himself. And when we are where he is, then out of that place, we serve little kids running around in the gym, throwing basketballs at each other. And then we hop on a plane and go to Romania. And then we start doing the ministries of reaching the community through Tiny Threads and through Upton Lake and through whatever else. But all of those things come second to a relationship with him, walking with him, wherever he calls. And there's a danger, right? If you're the impetuous type, to just jump in and just assume God's going to catch you. And if you think back to the temptation of Jesus, that's the second one he faced. Throw yourself off the Temple Mount, God's got to catch you. And Jesus responds with, don't put the Lord your God to the test. Make sure you know where he's calling, and then you go. If Jesus calls you to jump off the Temple Mount, that's a whole different story than you being like, I think this is what I'm going to do. Geronimo, here I go. And hope that God's going to make it all work out in the end. Now, most of us are not the Peters. Most of what I just said isn't for most of us in this room, right? For most of us in this room, getting out of the boat is a painful, slow process. Change of that kind is terrifying. But for Peter here, he's like realizing something very important. It is better to be in the middle of a storm with Jesus than in the safety of a boat without him. Just want to say that one more time. I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere, not original to me. It is better to be with Jesus in the storm than in the boat without him. And that's just something we have to evaluate for ourselves. So, question for ourselves. How do we know we've gotten out of the boat? How do we know where Jesus is? And I think there's a couple things. The first question to ask ourselves, how comfortable are you? How comfortable am I? If I'm super comfortable with where things are, and I'm not talking content, right? Because there's a difference between comfort and contentedness. We can be content with anything. That's what Paul tells us. But if we are comfortable with life and there's no risk, there's no challenge to where we stand, there's nothing in us that's like, there needs to be more, maybe we're still in the boat. Is there anything you're doing that without God's help is going to flop terribly? Is there anything you're involved with that if God does not intervene, it's going to fail? That's another question to ask. And the third question to ask ourselves, are we giving of ourselves in such a way that on paper it doesn't make sense? We're too generous. We're too risking of our emotions with people. We're too servant-oriented. Is it possible that on paper it doesn't make sense to be living the way that Christ has called you to live, and yet you are? So the challenge is, again, out of 12 people, only one got out of the boat, which means most of us are pretty content to do the things God called us to do and not change it. But here's the struggle. God pivots sometimes. He called them to get in the boat. He called them to row across to the other side. But now there's an opportunity for something different. And if they are unwilling to change, if they're unwilling to get out of the boat, they'll just stay there in comfort, but without Jesus. And I fear that that can happen to any of us at any given time, especially if we're doing the things that God's called us to do without thinking about new things he might be calling us to do. And so now we come to this responding with trust over fear. The second time fear shows up in this text. The first time is when Jesus shows up. That's scary. When Jesus shows up, sometimes that's terrifying. The second time it shows up is Peter has gotten out of the boat, and for a brief moment in time, he's doing something that no human has ever done. He is walking on water. Now, he's not walking on water in a nice, calm, clear blue day. I want you just to think about it. We just watched Castaway recently. If you've seen that movie, the storm. Can you imagine walking on water in a storm where waves are like 10 feet high? And that's where Peter is, walking with Jesus in a storm in the most amazing time ever. But suddenly, fear strikes him. And how does fear strike him according to the text? Notice what it says. But when he saw the wind and the waves, so what did he do? He took his eyes off of Jesus and put his eyes on the troubles. We all can do that. Every one of us in this room. How many troubles do you have in your life right now? How many of you have more than 5? So that's 5 things right there we can just start looking at anytime we want to. And it says that Peter was afraid. We could use the word anxious. We could use the word worry. We can use any of the synonyms we want. But there is always way more things to look at and be afraid of than there is to the one thing we're supposed to look at, and that's Jesus. So he starts to look at the issues. And suddenly, those first few steps that he was pretty confident in taking, he is now not so sure. And I just want to show that that's an entirely normal human behavior response. But if fear causes us to stop moving forward, it becomes sinful at that point. Fear is normal. But if fear keeps us from moving forward, it suddenly becomes sinful. And that is just a nature of where we are as human beings. And so for us, there's a ton of reasons why we won't get out of the boat. Fear of failure, that's a huge one for me. Fear of making the wrong decision. Fear of death. What if you sink? There's tons of reasons to stay in the boat. But Jesus is calling us out of the boat. And the risk is very real. Peter is willing to risk everything. So I want to throw for those of you who grew up back in the 90s, like myself, does anyone remember Cool Water, the cologne? Some of you are like, yep, I remember Cool Water. So right around my sophomore year of high school, the ad said, if I buy Cool Water cologne, I will be desirable to all the women in my life. Which, and since when do ads lie? Ads always tell you the truth. So I was like, I'm going to buy myself some Cool Water, and a teenage budget. That was a pretty big investment. But the problem was for me that because it was so valuable to me, I was like, I'm only going to wear it on special occasions. And I'm going to keep it in the box. I'm going to keep it on my shelf, and I'm only going to wear it on special occasions. Well, a year goes by. How many special occasions did I actually wear it? Like twice. And surprisingly, I know this is going to blow your mind, surprisingly, I still didn't have a girlfriend by my junior year, even though I wore Cool Water at least twice. And the reality of cologne in this sense is this. Because it's valuable, there is two struggles we have. The first is this. Because it's valuable, then do I keep it safe and never use it? Do I keep it safe and never use it? Because it's so valuable. I don't ever want to risk what I could lose. How many lives have you been given to live? One. Safe to say that's a very valuable thing. And yet if we never risk, if we never use it, then something can happen. C.S. Lewis puts it this way. He says, if you desire to keep your heart from ever being broken, you keep it locked up in a little box, you keep it safe, you keep it secure. He says you don't even allow pets to get close to you. But he says what can happen if that is true for you, and for me, is that something will happen to your heart. Yes, it won't be broken, but it will become unbreakable, and you will lose yourself in the process. So with cologne, if you leave it in the box and you never use it, it degrades over time. It becomes entirely useless. And the same thing is true of our lives. If we keep it safe and locked up in a box and only bring our real selves out on the occasion when it's worth it, we will degrade over time. And we will stay useless and unused over time. So at that point, I decided to change up my strategy. I started wearing it probably way too much. Because, you can't smell cologne on you after a while. So you're like, well, I can't smell it. Better put on some more. But here's the other flip side to cologne use. I did get a girlfriend who liked Cool Water. I married a woman from Coldwater who does not like that cologne. So I do not wear Cool Water any longer. I don't really wear cologne any longer either. I'm a 45-year-old man. Like, what do I got to prove, right? But here's the flip side of all of that. The smell is appealing to some and not appealing to others. If you decide to risk your life for Jesus, and I'm praying we collectively as a church do this, what's the cost? There is a cost. And some people will not like it. Jesus says that he's a fragrant offering. He says we are a fragrant offering. But he also goes on to say, Paul says, to some that smells like what? Death. And to other people it smells like life. If you decide to get out of the boat, you decide to follow Jesus and risk it all, there are going to be people who don't like that. And there are going to be people who stand against it. And if you just stay in the boat calm and quiet and keep your bottle of perfume locked up, your bottle of cologne locked up on the shelf, you won't even be noticed. But if you decide to get out and try something different, you will be noticed. And some people won't like it. So the 11 there, they have a choice. Because there's a consequence of staying in the boat. If we don't get out, if we don't risk, if we don't try new things, there's consequences to that too. At the very least in this story, they missed an opportunity to walk with Jesus in the middle of a storm on water. How amazing is that? Now, figuratively, what kind of storms are we in right now? There's a lot. But is it possible that Jesus is actually calling us now to walk with him in those storms, and that in some crazy way, we might actually see opportunities open up that would never open up before? And we might actually see things that are going to be amazing. But the problem is, if we don't listen to Jesus, the longer we don't listen to him, the harder it is to hear him the next time. Because he just becomes white noise. And it's not that Jesus doesn't call. It's that we've lost the ability to hear. And we miss out on not just opportunities, but we miss out on him. And I don't want to get to the end of my life. I just kind of said I don't want to make wrong choices. That's one of my big fear problems. I was like, I don't want to make the wrong decision. But how much worse would it be to never make a decision for fear of making the wrong one, and you look back over the course of your life, and you haven't really done anything that's notable? That would be tragic if we sit in the boat constantly, where it's safe and comfortable, and never actually willingly get out of the boat to see what's going to happen. Because Jesus is going to call us out of our comfort zone. He just will. It's a guarantee. But following Jesus means all kinds of struggle for us. One of the things I love is that the scriptures are filled with people who started water walking and then instantly found trouble as soon as they started. So if you take a look at Moses, Moses is called to go deliver the Israelites. He sees all kinds of miracles, and yet there's a point where he's like, God, just take me out of this. These people are too hard to deal with, and this is just not what I signed up for. And he's like, out. Elijah sees God answer by fire, lights a sacrifice up, burns up stone, wood, water, the whole thing, little nuclear blast. One woman stands in his way and says, I'm going to kill you, and he runs away and says, my life is useless, just kill me, God. You have Jeremiah the prophet who's told, you will be a pillar that cannot be cut down. Partway through, he's arrested, and he's like, God, you deceived me, you lied to me, you told me that I would be able to stand. I'm not standing. Every one of us, if we decide to risk ourselves for Jesus, are going to find that things might actually get harder, not easier with those first few steps. And I think it's just important for us to know that if we risk, that if we offer ourselves in a new way to do something different, it may get more difficult before it gets amazing. And I just want to be clear, right? Following Jesus is the only way to go, but it is not the easiest way to go. And if following Jesus for the sake of ease is what you're after, this story shows us that's not really the way it is. Because Peter's noticed, I'm walking in the middle of a storm, and things are not necessarily getting easier. It's not like the storm got calm as soon as he got out of the boat. It might have got worse for all we know. So when you have opportunity to witness to a friend, they may not respond well. When we have opportunity to serve or try to use our gifts, like I talked about a couple weeks ago, the use of our gifts may not go well. It may get more difficult. It's pretty safe to say that there's going to be times we sink and fail and fall. And we're going to have hopefully different candidates come up for pastoring, and we might have one that we love, and he's like, I'm going to Florida. And it might be difficult. There's going to be things that are going to be hard. And I just want to encourage us that that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. Because again, it's not about the things we're doing. It's about standing with the right person and standing with Jesus. So Peter struggled. I love the fact that there's this statement in Proverbs. It says, the righteous man falls 7 times but rises again. What does that statement carry with it? I just want you to break that thought down a little bit. The righteous falls 7 times and yet rises again. So give me some feedback. What's in that statement? A little louder, I'm getting older and deafer. There is failure in that. It's assumed. And not only that, who's failing? The righteous. How many times has the righteous person fallen at the very least? 6 times. And yet, what's the last assumed statement? The promise that we will rise again. We will fail. I hate failure. We are going to fail, people. We will. We're going to make the wrong decisions. We're going to lose our cool yet again. We're going to be impetuous and jump into something we shouldn't. We're going to be too slow to jump into something we should. But I just want you to notice the response of those who fall is they get back up. So we have a couple toddlers in the room, well, out there specifically. One of the great things about toddlers is how many times do they fall? They fall way more times than they walk for a while, and yet you never see a toddler fall for like the third time and be like, yeah, I'm just going to scoot around on my butt for the rest of my life. This walking thing is not for me. It is too painful. It's too embarrassing. I'm just done. And yet, how easy is it for us to fail and fall and just be like, and I think I'm just going to not try that again. Peter, you got to love one thing about Peter. How many times does that guy fall? A lot. He falls, all the way up past what we know in the book of Acts. Galatians tells us he fails again even after Jesus gave him the Holy Spirit. He's hanging out with a bunch of Gentiles. Suddenly a bunch of Jewish Christians show up, and what's he do? I'm not hanging out with you anymore. And he leaves the Christians and embarrasses them and only hangs out with Jewish people for a while. And Paul gets in his face and is like, what are you doing? So one thing we got to love about Peter, he fails a ton, but what's he do? He gets back up again. He rises. And so in this particular case, he looks at the wind, he looks at the waves, he fails, he falls, he starts to sink, and yet what does Jesus do? Immediately grabs him. Because just like a parent watching a small kid learn to walk for the first time, they are right there, boom, and grabs Peter and helps him rise again. So again, when things are not going to work out for us, and they won't always work out for us, remind each other, remind me, okay, let's be honest, remind me a lot that he's still working, he hasn't left us, and that failure only really becomes failure if we refuse to learn. I love this movie, I quote it some, Chariots of Fire, and we have the story of true stories of two men who went to the Olympics in the 1920s, and one man runs for the glory of God, and you gotta love Eric Liddell, however you wanna say it. He's running, what does he do with his head when he's running? Okay, he just throws his head back and you're just like, wow, that's terrible form, but a wonderful act of worship because he runs for the glory of God, and he says that over and over again. When I run, I feel his pleasure. But I want to focus on the second guy, Harold Abrams, right? Abrams is a man who runs to win, and that's the reason why he runs. And one of the things that happens in the story is Eric Liddell beats him in a race that he was supposed to win. And he's sitting there after the race in the stands, and you see the picture up there, and he's just replaying. And if you watch the movie, he's replaying the loss of it in his mind over and over and over again. It's becoming like a pattern for him. He can only think about the time he failed. And his girlfriend walks up, Sybil, and she says, "You were magnificent. He was just more magnificent. That's all. Cheer up, Harold. It's a race you've lost. You've been beaten, but nobody's died." To which Harold responds with, "I didn't come here to take beatings. I came to win." And what's he go on to say, for those of you who know the movie? "If I can't win, I won't run." And Sybil looks to him and says, "If you don't run, you can't win." Satan would want nothing more than to beat us down with our failures, to have those cycles of all the things we've done wrong throughout the course of our lives playing on an endless loop. Because if you're sitting in the stands replaying the losses, what are you not doing? You are not getting back up, and you are not running forward. And I don't care how many years in this journey of Christian living you're in, falling down is going to happen. Happened to me, so most of you know, before I hurt myself, I used to run Schultzville like all the time. Like 20 years of running Schultzville. You know how many times I've fallen down while running on Schultzville Road? Twice, okay? 20 years of running. I was running down the road, and then Daniel Gertland just drove up in his car. I looked over at him, was waved, and then fell. I was like, I've run this road 20 years, and I'm falling. It's the truth of the matter that it doesn't matter how long we're on this path. We are going to fail, and we are going to fall. And part of it is accepting the fact that that's going to happen. Peter sank, but Peter cries out, "Lord, save me." He says, "Save me." And he throws his hand up, and what does Jesus do? Boom. Grabs him immediately and pulls him up and gives him a rebuke, like, "You have little faith. Why did you doubt? Why did you take your eyes off of me? Why did you start looking at all the issues going on around you? Why did you stop looking at me?" at the same time, in God's grace, he grabs him. He pulls him up out of that water, and you got to imagine Peter never forgot that moment. Maybe one of those reasons why Peter's always willing to try something new, why he's always willing to risk something, to do something that he's never done before. So moving beyond amazement to worship. He pulls Peter up, they get into the boat, and then notice what it says. As soon as they get into the boat, what happens to the storm? It's done. Storm's done. Because the lesson has been learned. And when the lesson has been learned, the trial ends. And this is one of those realities that we struggle with. Because again, that means God will send us into trials on purpose to teach us something. And we do not know when that trial is going to end. I wish I could tell you. We will guarantee have a pastor by August 3rd. That'd be great. Do I know that? I don't even know what's happening tomorrow. I'm not even totally sure what's going to happen by 2 o'clock this afternoon. And yet we know one thing. We are not alone in our trial. Jesus knew where they were. He's walking straight for them. He is going to pick us up and drag us where he wants us to go. And what they had been trying to do all night in their own strength in following Jesus' command to get to the other side happens in a moment as soon as Jesus is with them and the lesson is learned. I think it's in John's gospel. It says immediately they hit the other side. It's like the storm ended, Jesus pulls Peter into the boat, and there they are right where they wanted to be in the whole time. He pulls them out. He saves them. And so again, for us, we can think of ourselves as only one person. We only have our little bit of ability. We don't have a whole lot of skills. Maybe we're like, I don't know what you want to do with me, Jesus. But if we have the desire to say, whatever you want of me, I will gladly and freely give to you, then we are very much on the right track. So my prayer for us, whether you're the kind of person that's the Peter, who's willing to jump out of a boat and try something new right away, or whether you're the 11 who are hanging out in the boat kind of like, I know Jesus told me to do this, so I'm just going to keep doing this until I die. My hope is that something radical will take place, because I want you to notice something. It says they went from being amazed to doing something very specific that we are all called to do. Look at verse 33, if you would, with me. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him. Here is the command to every single one of us in this room. Can you say this? Truly, you are the Son of God. And tell everyone that truth. They moved from being amazed at what was happening to worshiping God. So for those of us who are the Peters in the room, when you jump out of the boat, you're going to be noticed. Where does the glory go when all is said and done? Does it go to you? Or does it go to him? And for those of us that are terrified and we're learning lessons the hard way about needing to get out of the boat, when we learn that lesson, even if it's a little bit, what do we do with the glory? We bring it right back to him because he alone is worthy. And so they worship him and say, truly you are the Son of God. This was one of those moments that was very memorable in the lives of the disciples. And my hope for each of us is that the storms we go through will move us from theoretical knowledge of the Bible to application of the Bible, to know the God of truth, to know the God of Scripture. And the question is that what we really want? Is that what we really want? Do we really want to know Jesus more? Do we really want to walk with him? Or do we kind of want him to just give us a gold star for doing whatever it is we're currently doing? The challenge is he's pulling us to something more. And that's scary. But if we step out of the boat, he says he'll be with us. I want to come back to that text that I read earlier out of 2 Chronicles 16:9. It says, for the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. I just want you to notice something. It says he is looking for people committed so that when he finds someone who's committed, what will he do? Empower them to do even more. So when his eye roams throughout Clinton Corners and it rests on you and it rests on me, where is my heart's commitment to? What am I willing to do for him? Where is my risk factor? And I just want us to, as we approach communion, I want to shift gears, but only slightly. How many people are fully committed to God really in this life? Consistently, always. None of us. Like Peter here gets it more than the other 11, and he walks on water for what, 5 steps before he starts to sink? But there was one person who authentically was 100% fully committed to the Lord. And here's the craziest truth. That one person who was 100% committed to the Lord was drowned because of his commitment. Jesus is the only human on the face of the earth who was fully committed to the Lord. And when the eye of the Lord found him on the day of crucifixion, what did the Lord do? Struck him down. Not because he was a foolish sinner, which this passage goes on to talk about. He was struck down because he was fully committed to the Lord in order that he could take our place because, let's be honest, none of us are fully committed to the Lord. Jesus walked on that water. He calls Peter to walk on that water. Peter was faithless. He was faithful for however long, and then he begins to sink. But Jesus was the perfect Son of God who remained faithful to God his entire life. He remained faithful and did not doubt all the way through to the cross, and yet what happened to him? Again, because he was faithful, he sunk. But he sunk for you and for me. He took our place so that the wrath of God that we deserve would fall on him and not on us. Why is it that we can risk everything for him? I just want to end on this thought. We risk because he gave everything first. We risk because he risked and did more than just risk, gave it all to the end. And so when he calls us to get out of the boat and walk on water with him, he is not asking us to do anything that is illogical given what he's already committed to. We have opportunity this morning to take communion, to reflect and to remember what that risk and sacrifice meant. And my hope for us as we take communion, right? It's not whether you failed this week. We failed this week. I'll just answer that question for all of us. It's coming back to him and saying, I'm going to rise again. I'm going to connect myself to the person of Jesus through communion, remember his strength, remember his power, and trust him to carry me through today and tomorrow and to the end of my life. And if you feel that God's calling you to something, I just want to encourage us now as we take a few minutes of quiet before we do communion to be willing to step out of the boat. And if there's things in our lives that we are unwilling to give up, if there's boats of popularity or resources or retirement or whatever that we're just hoping is going to pay off for us, I want to encourage you to do business with God this morning and say, I'm giving that boat to you, God. I'm stepping out. I'm going to trust you. And then follow through. And when it gets hard, keep walking. So I'm going to close in prayer. We'll do communion. We'll do a minute of silence or 2 minutes of silence. I just want to encourage you to be thinking about what God's speaking to you about. And then Melody will come and play some songs, and we'll take the elements back to our seats, and then we'll take them together as we read the text. But I'd like to close in prayer. Lord, you are worthy. You're the only one that's worthy to receive glory and honor and power. Help us, Lord, to be people who just see that, long for that, and are willing to step out of the boat, not because of the success that you may give us or because of the adventure or the joy that we may experience, but because to step out of the boat is to be with you. Help us, Lord, to long to be with you, to be next to you no matter where you would go, whether it's through storms or not, because we know that you stepped into the storm of sin and chaos in order to draw us to yourself. Lord, I thank you that you don't call us to do anything you were unwilling to do first. And for those of us in here maybe who know we're in the boat, who's struggling to get out, I pray that you would empower us to trust you and to do what you've called us to do, and to do so with strength. I thank you for those in this room, for all of us who have committed to seek you. Help us to encourage each other to do that as long as it is called today. And I pray these things in your name. Amen. So a few minutes of silence, and then in a minute and a half or so, I'll have Melody.